But besides Flint, it's not the only crisis at the governor's door. He spent a part of his address this week on Detroit public schools, and this Wednesday, 88 schools were shut down by a wave of teacher sickouts. Here's the governor on DPS.
Detroit schools are in a crisis. The Detroit schools are in need of a transformational change. Too many schools are failing at their central task of preparing our young Michiganders for a successful, rewarding life. Simply put, not all Detroit students are getting the education they deserve.
All right, so that was the governor talking about DPS, and this is not the first time that we've talked about the fact that something has to be done and that something has to be done now. I want to address first off the teacher sickouts, the fact that the district has now tried to seek an injunction so that teachers do not do this anymore. Stephen, where do you stand on teachers and their sickouts?
Well, I don't think no one is a fan of the idea of closing the schools, sending kids who should be in school somewhere else, and I don't think enough has been made of this, in a city where so many parents struggle with childcare anyway, forcing them into awful kinds of decision making, at the last minute. At the same time, I'm not sure what else people wanted teachers to do. Teachers have been talking about the conditions in the schools, trying to get people's attention on the deteriorating conditions for a really long time, and really no one has paid attention. And if you look at what's happened since they started this, they are getting attention. The mayor went and took a look at the schools, then went to talk to the delegation and the governor, and we saw bills crafted. So, I mean, it's not an ideal tactic for the kids, I don't think, but it is something that worked to try to fix people's attention on a problem that everyone else was just ignoring.
And a problem that everyone knew was there. And it seems, Nolan, why do we wait until we are actually at the drop-dead point where we've got a district that's going to be out of money in April to then finally move on? We've seen this coming a year and a half ago.
I mean, they've been trying to get those bills passed for a year, so it wasn't last minute. I think this is a despicable tactic for a lot of reasons, including the ones Steve mentioned. But 70% of these kids are on free or reduced lunches. Most of these kids get 1, 2, or even 3 meals a day at their schools. Who's talking about whether these children are going hungry on days when their teachers are out? They've made their point. It's beyond. They're doing this beyond the health and safety of children. They also don't like the emergency management. They're not crazy about the governor's plan. They've got a lot of grievances. This is not the way to press them.
I think what's interesting too is that you've got a couple of different factions here that are operating within the teachers, and that maybe is where people don't understand exactly who's behind all of this.
Well, you have an ongoing dispute between the elected president of the teachers union, Steve Kahn, who was removed by the national, I believe, the national AFT.
And he's appealing.
He's appealing to try to get his job back. Meanwhile, Ivy Bailey is the person who represents the teachers. So who knows who's in charge? I mean, Steve Kahn is very involved in the sickouts. There's no question about that. And I spoke with him this week. He's very passionate about the idea that teachers have been backed into a corner and don't have another way to sort of express what's on their minds. The other thing that I think is really important is thinking about how are you going to include teachers in the reform effort. The history in Detroit is to make teachers the enemy. It's your fault. You don't want to change. You're just trying to protect your jobs, which doesn't get to the place where you're trying to bring them into the idea of creating a school environment where everybody has what they need to help the kids perform. And so,
but the unions were at part of the Detroit Education Commission. Dave Hecker sat on that.
They were at the table for that.
I think you need to get more actual classroom teachers involved in those sort of study groups, those sort of recommend groups. I mean, the union has its own agenda apart from the classroom. I think it'd be interesting to hear from those teachers.
And I think it's interesting, though. I mean, and that's why this makes this issue, I think, so complicated, is because we're talking about spinning off into a new district. We're talking about the debt. We're talking about buildings. So we're talking about damage in classrooms. We haven't started to talk about curriculum. We haven't started to talk about the ways people are teaching in classes, and obviously class size, which I think makes a huge impact on how you can teach children as well.
Well, it's one of the things that teachers are pointing out. You have 40, 50 kids in some classrooms in the district, and what do you expect the results to be? And again, this is not something that happened last week or last month or even over the last year. Right. This has built over a long time, and teachers have been saying, this is not okay, we can't operate under these conditions, and no one was paying attention.
One of the problems is they can't hire teachers. They've got a large number of openings. They can't find teachers. They can't find subs. Not all of it goes to money. A lot of it goes to the fact that nobody wants to work in the district.
All right, so what are you hearing out of Lansing, Nolan, in terms of the political will to, from legislators who maybe are on the west side of the state and the north side of the state to help out Detroit and get behind this?
Well, Duggan met with the Detroit delegation on Tuesday, I believe, Tuesday afternoon, to try to get them on board. Detroit delegation has to lead this. The governor told us yesterday that you can't expect outstate lawmakers to commit $500 million to Detroit debt relief if Detroit lawmakers aren't going to get behind it. They've got to be the lead, and I think the effort now is to get them on board, at least the debt relief portion of this package, and there's no reason they shouldn't. You've got to get rid of that debt before, or address it before you can do anything else.
That's going to impact the entire state.